All right, let's dive into one of history's most dramatic labels, the Dark Ages. Was this really a time of total chaos after a great empire fell? Or, is that name just completely missing the point? Let's find out together.
So, first off, where did that name even come from? I mean, the Dark Ages, it sounds like the end of the world. But the real story is this incredible cycle of things falling apart and then being reborn, which actually tells us a ton about how civilizations rise and fall.
Okay, first things first, let's get our terms straight. The official name for this whole period is the medieval period, and that name, medieval, literally means middle time. Later on, thinkers kind of looked back on it as just this long, messy gap between two amazing eras, the glory of Rome and the rebirth of the Renaissance.
But you have to remember, this middle time was over 1,000 years long. So historians break it down into three chunks: the early, the high, and the late Middle Ages. We're going to be focusing on that first part, the era that gets stuck with the Dark Ages label from about 400 to 1000 CE.
So here's the crucial thing. The darkness wasn't about a lack of sunlight. It was about a lack of power, centralized power. After the Western Roman Empire completely collapsed, there was no single government to keep the roads safe, to protect trade, or even to enforce basic laws across Europe. It created this massive power vacuum.
So how does the world's biggest superpower just disappear? Well, the answer is kind of surprising. The cracks didn't start showing at the very end. Note, they started to appear when the empire was still near the absolute height of its power.
And that brings us to this guy, Emperor Diocletian. Back in 284 CE, he's looking at a map of his empire and realizing he has an impossible job. The Roman Empire had just gotten too big, too complex for any one person to govern. His solution was pretty bold, and, well, it changed everything. He decided to split it right down the middle. Diocletian took the eastern half for himself. It was wealthier and more stable, and he gave the west to a co-emperor, Maximian. Now, the fates of these two halves could not have been more different. The west was constantly dealing with invasions, and it crumbled in less than 200 years. The east, though, it survived for another 1,000 years. And the Eastern Empire didn't just survive, it totally thrived and evolved into something new. It became known as the Byzantine Empire, a real powerhouse of trade and culture. Its capital was the incredible city of Constantinople, and its church eventually split from Rome, becoming the Orthodox Church. It was a whole different world from the chaos that was swallowing up the West.
So, for centuries, Western Europe stayed broken up, fractured, and pretty chaotic. But then, in the late 700s, this towering new figure shows up with this one single massive ambition: to rebuild the empire that had been lost. His name was Charlemagne.
Charlemagne was an absolutely brilliant and, let's be honest, a completely ruthless military commander. For decades, he was just constantly at war, and he somehow pulled off the impossible. He conquered this whole patchwork of warring kingdoms and forged them back into a single, massive European empire, the first one since the Romans.
But Charlemagne was smart. He knew that swords and armies weren't enough to hold an empire together for long. He needed something to unify people, an ideology, and he found it in Christianity. He created this incredibly powerful alliance with the church in Rome, and pretty often, he'd forcibly convert the people he conquered. His new empire was going to be a Christian empire. This whole alliance really came to a head in 799 CE. So get this, Pope Leo III gets attacked right there in Rome and has to flee for his life. Who does he run to? Charlemagne. So Charlemagne marches his army all the way to Italy, crushes the Pope's enemies, and puts him back in power. The Pope's way of saying thank you was a gesture that would literally change history. He crowned Charlemagne the new Holy Roman Emperor, basically declaring him the true heir to the ancient Roman emperors.
So there you have it. Order is restored. A new Roman Empire is born. The Dark Ages are over, right? Well, not so fast. See, the problem was, this entire grand new empire was built on the shoulders of just one man.
And then came this year, 814 CE, the year that Charlemagne, the great unifier, died.
The result was immediate, and it was catastrophic. Without that one visionary leader holding it all together, the massive empire he had spent his entire life building just broke apart.
And the reason why is a classic lesson from history. The entire system was totally dependent on him, personally. There wasn't any lasting institution, no clear line of succession strong enough to keep it all together. The second he was gone, the chaos just flooded right back in.
So what's the big takeaway from this whole epic story? This cycle of collapse, and then unification, and then collapse all over again. What does this pattern really tell us about how power and stability work?
When you look at it, the story of the early Middle Ages is just a perfect loop. You start with chaos, the power vacuum left behind by Rome. Then a powerful leader, Charlemagne, comes in and imposes order and unity. But when that single leader dies, the whole system collapses, and chaos returns once more.
And that leaves us with a really crucial question, doesn't it? Charlemagne's story, it shows us that one powerful person can absolutely forge unity out of chaos. But it also shows us just how fragile that unity can be. It really makes you wonder, can true, lasting stability ever be built around one single person? Or does it have to be built on institutions and ideas that can outlive any one leader? Something to think about.